Blue-Eyed Barbarians from the Western Regions, the epic history of the white founders of Chinese Buddhism. Spread of Buddhism from the Silk Road to China. The history of Chinese Buddhism begins in the Han Dynasty, when Buddhism first began to arrive via the Silk Road networks. The early period of Chinese Buddhist history saw efforts to propagate Buddhism, establish institutions, and translate Buddhist texts into Chinese. The effort was led by white Central Asian missionaries of Indo-European heritage, including Parthians, Kushans, Tocharians, and Sogdians. These peoples were often noted by the Chinese for their fair complexion, tall stature, and deep-set eyes. Buddhism disseminated through Central Asia, in particular the Kushan Empire, which was often known in ancient Chinese sources as Da Yuezhi, Great Yuezhi, after the founding tribe. Buddhism was first practiced in the western regions and then spread to the Han capital Luoyang, present-day Henan, where Emperor Ming of Han established the White Horse Temple in 68 CE. Buddhist missionaries began bringing Buddhism to China during the Han Dynasty, and the religion was present in China at the beginning of the Common Era. Buddhist missionaries made use of both the overland Central Asian Silk Road and the maritime routes. Initially, Buddhism was poorly understood and often confused with and mixed with Taoism. The Chinese saw many similarities between the two religions. This is likely due to Taoism's common Aryan origins in the Zhou Dynasty. There was also much criticism leveled at the new Aryan religion by the Confucian elites, who were weary of its foreign barbarian origins. Centuries after Buddhism originated among some of the Aryan and Scythian elites in northern India during the Vedic era, Mahayana Buddhism arrived in China through the Silk Route in the 1st century CE. Mahayana Buddhism entered Han China via the Silk Road, beginning in the 1st or 2nd century CE. The first documented translation efforts by Buddhist monks in China were in the 2nd century CE via the Kushan Empire into the Chinese territory bordering the Tarim Basin under Kanishka. These contacts transmitted strands of Sarvastivadin and Tamrashatya Buddhism throughout the Eastern world. Buddhism entered China via the Silk Road. White Buddhist monks traveled with merchant caravans on the Silk Road to preach their new religion. Extensive contacts started in the 2nd century CE, probably as a consequence of the expansion of the Greco-Buddhist Kushan Empire into the Tarim Basin with the missionary efforts of a great number of white Central Asian Buddhist monks to Chinese lands. The first missionaries and translators of Buddhist scriptures into Chinese were either Parthian, Kushan, Sogdian, or Kuchan. In the middle of the 2nd century, the Kushan Empire under King Kanishka from its capital at Purushapura, modern Peshawar, India expanded into Central Asia. As a consequence, cultural exchanges greatly increased with the regions of Kashgar, Khotan, and Yarkand, all in the Tarim Basin, modern Xinjiang. White Buddhist missionaries became active shortly thereafter in the Chinese capitals of Luoyang and Nanjing, where they distinguished themselves by their translation work. They promoted both Nikaya and Mahayana scriptures. Early white Buddhist missionaries from the West. An Shigao, 148 to 180 CE, was an early Buddhist missionary to China and the earliest known translator of Buddhist texts into Chinese. He was a prince of Parthia, nicknamed the Parthian Marquess, who renounced his claim to the royal throne of Parthia in order to serve as a Buddhist missionary monk in China. The prefix An in An Shigao's name is an abbreviation of Anxi, the Chinese name given to the regions ruled by the Parthian Empire. Most visitors from that country who took a Chinese name received the An prefix to indicate their origin in Anxi. His journeys in southern China were recorded in his biographies, Chu Sanzang Jiji and Gaoseng Zhuan. Antonio Forte found in various secular sources that there were several individuals living in 4th to 8th century China who were of Parthian descent and claimed ancestry from an individual called An Shigao. Given that the Parthian Empire was decentralized in structure, some theorize that he may have been a member of a small royal family that held power in the eastern end of the empire, like Margiana, where it would have been plausible for them to come into contact with Buddhism. An Shigao migrated eastward into China, settling at the Han capital of Luoyang in 148 CE, where he produced a substantial number of translations of Buddhist texts and attracted a devoted community of followers. More than a dozen works by An Shigao are currently extant, including texts dealing with meditation, Abhidharma, and basic Buddhist doctrines. An Shigao's corpus does not contain any Mahayana scriptures, though he himself is regularly referred to as a bodhisattva in early Chinese sources. Scholarly studies of his translations have shown that they are most closely affiliated with the Sarvastivada school. An Juan was a Parthian layman credited with working alongside An Shigao in the translation of early Buddhist texts in Luoyang in later Han China. Lokaksema, 147 to 189, was a Kushan Buddhist monk who traveled to China during the Han Dynasty and is one of the first known translators of Mahayana religious texts into any language. Details of Lokaksema's life come to us via a short biography by Senghui 445 to 518 CE and his text Collected Records Concerning the Tripitaka. His name is usually rendered in Sanskrit as Lokaksema, though this is disputed by some scholars, and variants such as Lokaksema have been proposed. Senghui refers to him as Zhi Qian. The Zhi prefix added to his Chinese name suggests that Lokaksema was of white Yuezhi ethnicity. He is traditionally said to have been a Kushan, an empire ruled by the Yuezhi. Given his background, Lokaksema was very likely to have been multilingual and have had knowledge of various languages, including Gandhari Prakrit, which was used as the language of religion, administration, and commerce in the northwestern parts of India. But his mother tongue was Bactrian. Lokaksema arrived at the Han capital Luoyang toward the end of the reign of Emperor Huan of Han, 147 to 168, and between 178 and 189 CE, translated a number of Mahayana Buddhist texts into Chinese. Lokaksema's translation activities, as well as those of the Parthians, An Shigao and An Xuan slightly earlier, or his fellow Yuezhi Dharmaraksa, around 286 CE, illustrate the key role that white Central Asians had in propagating Buddhism to the countries of East Asia. With the decline and fall of the Han, the empire fell into chaos and Lokaksema disappeared from the historical record, so we do not know the date of his death. Ji Yao was a Buddhist author and translator active in China and first mentioned in Senghui's collected records concerning the Tripitaka, a catalog published in 515 CE of Buddhist texts translated into Chinese. The text suggests he was contemporary with the translator Lokaksema, who lived in the second half of the 2nd century CE during the Han Dynasty. There is only one sentence regarding Ji Yao in Senghui's work, found in the section on Lokaksema, that says only, "At that time there was also Ji Yao, who translated the Chengju Guangming Jing." The catalog states this text, which can be rendered in English as the Sutra on the Completion of Brightness, was produced during the reign of Emperor Ling of Han, which would place it somewhere in the range of 168 to 190 CE. The surname Zhi typically indicated the person bearing it was of Yuezhi ethnicity. Huijiao's biographies of eminent monks, produced about 530 CE, also briefly mentions Ji Yao. It states that he was a monk, and it also attributes an additional translation to him, namely the Xiao Benqi, which is apparently lost. Zhi Qian, 222 to 252 CE, was a Buddhist layman of Yuezhi ancestry who translated a wide range of Buddhist scriptures into Chinese. He was the grandson, or according to another source, the son, of an immigrant from the country of the great Yuezhi, an area that overlapped to at least some extent with the territory of the Kushan Empire. According to the Chinese custom of the time, he used the ethnonym Zhi as his surname to indicate his foreign ancestry. Of all the translators to take part in the study of Buddhist texts during this period, Zhi Qian has been described as the most versatile and most prolific. Zhi Qian was born in Luoyang to a notable family of Yuezhi origin. The medieval biographer Senghui stated that Zhi Qian's grandfather was a Yuezhi named Fotu, who, along with several hundreds of his fellow countrymen, submitted himself before Emperor Ling of Han. As a reward, he was honored by the Han court with the title Shuai Shan Zhonglang Jiang. At an early age, Zhi Qian became a disciple of Zhi Liang, who in turn had been a disciple of the famous translator of Mahayana scriptures, Lokaksema, 168 to 189 CE, who was likewise of Yuezhi ancestry. Toward the end of the Han Dynasty, as chaos spread throughout the north, Zhi Qian migrated with several dozens of his countrymen to the southern Wu kingdom, settling first at Wuchang, then in Jianye after 229 CE. According to the earliest extant biography, contained in Sengyo's Chu Sanzang Ji, completed in 518 CE, the Wu ruler Sun Quan was so impressed with Zhi Qian's abilities that he appointed him tutor to the crown prince. Toward the end of his life, Zhi Qian became an upasaka, taking the 5 lay precepts and retiring to a monastic environment in the mountains. When he died at the age of 60 in 252 CE or shortly after, the Wu ruler of the time, Sun Liang, is said to have written a letter to the monastic community mourning his death. Kang Senghui was a Buddhist monk and translator during the Three Kingdoms period of ancient China. He was born in Jiaozhi, modern-day northern Vietnam. He was the son of a Sogdian merchant, hence the last name of Kang, meaning one whose forefathers had been people from Kangju or Sogdia. Kang received a Chinese literary education and was widely read in the 6 Confucian classics. He also read Sanskrit and was known for his knowledge of the Tripitaka, the Buddhist canon. He joined the Sangha, the Buddhist monastic order, as a teenager, following the death of his parents. Kang contributed more to the diffusion of Buddhist sutras as a preacher than to their translation into the Chinese language, as there are only 2 collections of Avadanas in the canon which are attributed to him. Kang is known as Kuang Tung Hoi in Vietnam, and Thong Bien, 1096, claims scriptural traditions from Kang-influenced Vietnamese Buddhism. The white Sogdian monk Kang Senghui is regarded as the first Vietnamese patriarch of Buddhism in Vietnam. Dharmaraksa, 233–310, was one of the most important early translators of Mahayana sutras into Chinese. Several of his translations had profound effects on East Asian Buddhism. He is described in scriptural catalogs as Yuezhi in origin. His family lived at Dunhuang, where he was born around 233 CE. At the age of 8, he became a novice and took the Kushan monk named Zhu Gaozuo as his teacher. As a young boy, Dharmaraksa was said to be extremely intelligent and journeyed with his teacher to many countries in the western regions where he learned Central Asian languages and scripts. He then traveled back to China with a quantity of Buddhist texts and translated them with the aid of numerous assistants and associates, both Chinese and foreign, from Parthians to Khotanese, who were both Scythians. One of his more prominent assistants was a Chinese upasaka, Ni Chengyuan, who served as a scribe and editor. Dharmaraksa first began his translation career in Chang'an, present-day Xi'an, in 266 CE, and later moved to Luoyang, the capital of the newly formed Jin dynasty. He was active in Dunhuang for some time as well, and alternated between the 3 locations. It was in Chang'an that he made the first known translation of the Lotus Sutra and the 10 Stages Sutra, 2 texts that later became definitive for Chinese Buddhism in 286 and 302 respectively. He died at the age of 78 after a period of illness. The exact location of his death is still disputed. The decline of Han rule and the rise of foreign kingdoms. In the final years of the Western Jin dynasty, tribal subjects collectively known as the 5 Barbarians started to dominate northern and western China. They were known as the Xiongnu, Jie, Xianbei, Di, and Qiang. The Xiongnu and Xianbei were diverse steppe confederacies. The Xiongnu had started out with a white Scythian upper caste, but were predominantly mixed or Mongoloid by this point. The Xianbei were predominantly Mongoloid with some white minorities. The Di and Qiang were Tibeto-Burman Mongoloid groups whose names were influenced by some white Proto-Scythians who had interacted with the Shang and Zhou dynasties. The term Qiang became a general exonym used by the ancient Chinese for various Western barbarians. The only one of these 5 groups who were basically entirely white were the Jie. The Jie were consistently described as a white Europoid people with tall noses and full beards. The Jie, a nomadic group who contributed to the collapse of the Western Jin, had origins linked to the Sogdians, a White Indo-European people from Central Asia. The Jie were a nomadic ethnic group in northern China and are classified among the 5 Barbarians, Wu Hu, who contributed to the collapse of the Western Jin dynasty in the early 4th century. The Jie people were a branch of the Xiongnu who were of Sogdian origin, descended from Sogdian and possibly other Indo-European groups who joined the Xiongnu after their territory was conquered. Hunping, a type of funerary urn from this era, shows cultural syncretism, including early Buddhist images and depictions of Europoid horsemen wearing pointed caps, likely introduced through Silk Road interactions involving Sogdian merchants. Hunping, or soul jars, are a type of funerary urn popular during the Western Jin dynasty. These vessels were highly decorated with elaborate models of palatial structures and auspicious animals, and notably often featured some of the earliest known Buddhist images in China. The presence of these Buddhist images, which often include images of Europoid warriors and horsemen, indicates the integration of foreign belief systems, which were often spread along the Silk Road by Central Asian merchants, including the Sogdians. Western Jin Celadon figures would also occasionally show Europoid men with pointed caps and foreign clothing. The Sogdians were a people of great mercantile ability who established vibrant trading diasporas across Asia, actively interacting with Chinese populations during the Western Jin and later dynasties. A famous Sogdian letter from 313 CE describes the chaos of the Xiongnu invasion that led to the collapse of the Western Jin capital, Luoyang, known as the Yongjia disaster, highlighting their contemporary presence and interaction with these events. The Jin dynasty was severely weakened by the War of the Eight Princes and lost control of northern China after non-Han Chinese settlers rebelled and captured Luoyang and Chang'an. Northern China fragmented into a series of independent states known as the 16 Kingdoms. During this period, northern China was ruled by various non-Han groups from the north and west. It was the perfect time for white Buddhist monks from foreign lands to spread their teachings throughout northern China. Jie Sogdian founders of Later Zhao, the Jie people were Kangju Sogdians. Although the Kangju's territory was small, the fertility of the land and their sophisticated civilization enabled the Kangju to maintain a large population, becoming a major military power. The Kangju were in frequent struggles with another Indo-European tribe called the Wusun, during which they, in the mid-1st century BCE, allied themselves with the northern Xiongnu. The Xiongnu and Kangju were initially successful, besieging the Wusun in 42 BCE. The Han, however, intervened, defeating and killing the northern Xiongnu ruler at Talas in 36 BCE, Battle of Jiji, thereby contributing to the decrease in the original Scythian rulers of Xiongnu. During the Xiongnu Civil War, the Kangju Qianku Jie had sided with the southern Xiongnu and joined them. The Jie were one of the 5 tribal groups which pillaged China. They were said to have possessed a higher nose bridge than the other nomadic groups. The Jie people dwelled in 3 counties in today's Shanxi, including Jieshe. However, it could be that the place was a newly added name to denote the fact that the Jie lived there, not that the Jie derived the name from the said place. According to the conversation between Fotu Cheng and Shi Hu, the Jie ruler, though a second generation in comparison with founder Shi Lei, was still someone to be born outside of the China domain. This means that the Jie migrants entered China to settle down next to the Huns as relatively newcomers. The Jie and the Huns were not friends, and many conflicts had occurred between them. Eventually, the Jie would disassociate from the Xiongnu Huns entirely. According to sinologist Mark Edward Lewis, the Jie were of Indo-European origin, probably Sogdian. According to the Book of Wei, 6th century CE, the name Jie was derived from the Jishi area, modern Yushi County in Shanxi Province, where the Jie resided. The Jie may have given their name to this region. According to the Book of Jin, the ancestors of Shi Lei were a part of the multi-ethnic southern Xiongnu tribe known as Qianku, although by the 4th century, Shi Lei and his people were classed separate from the Xiongnu as a miscellaneous Hu group. Edwin Pullyblank believes the Qianku represent the Kangju state of Sogdia. Kangju was constituted by Sogdian people. Some have linked the names Shi and Jie to a Sogdian statelet known as Shiguo, literally stone country, at now Tashkent, also meaning stone city in common Turkic. The dynastic surname of the state, Later Zhao, was Shi, stone, from a tribe Xiansui, Qiangyeo. The tribe Xiantsui was one of 19 tribes of the southern Xiongnu, but they were Kangju in origin and were a part of the tribal group with a common name, Tse Chiat. The existence of certain ties of the Tse Jie tribes with the Central Asian princedoms Kangar, Kangju, is traceable. The names Xianizui and Kantsui are synonyms. Presumably, these Jie Kiat Kangju had joined the Xiongnu after the Xiongnu Empire had expanded into their territory. The Jie tribe Qiangku were Kangju people who had been incorporated into the Xiongnu Tribal Confederation. Shi Lei, the founder of the Later Zhao Dynasty, was a descendant of the Xiongnu Qiangku tribe, Kangju Sogdians, although by his time he and his people had become a separate ethnic group known as the Ji. The Jie people had disassociated themselves from the Xiongnu Huns at an early date, becoming a miscellaneous Hu. This is why they preserved their white Europoid traits. It's because they didn't mix with the Turks, Mongols, and Han, who were part of the multi-ethnic Xiongnu Confederacy. Shi Lei was a Jie Sogdian chieftain from Shangdang Commandery in Bing Province. In 302 or 303, Bing Province suffered a major famine, and the Jie tribes were seriously affected. Shi Lei's tribe spread out and became refugees. Shi and many other Ji and Hu people were captured by Jin officials and sold as slaves. Eventually, he was sold to a man named Shi Huan, but Shi Huan freed him after becoming impressed with his talents. Eventually, he became a leader of bandits. Shi Lei would go on to become the founding emperor of the Ji-led Later Zhao Dynasty of China. He was initially sold as a slave by Western Jin officials, but after attaining freedom, he helped start a rebellion and eventually became a powerful general for the Han Zhao Dynasty, conquering most of northern China in Han Zhao's name, but holding the territory under his own control. Shi Lei is notably the only emperor in Chinese history to have risen from the status of slave. Initially serving the Xiongnu-led Han Zhao state, ruled by mixed-race Huns from the Chug clan, Shi Lei led armies to conquer vast territories in the name of Han Zhao, notably defeating the Jin imperial army at the Battle of Ningping in 311, which facilitated the capture of Luoyang. While nominally serving Han Zhao, Shi Lei established his own strong military and territorial base in Hebei, effectively operating independently and controlling his conquered lands. After disputes with the Han Zhao Emperor Liu Yao, Shi Lei declared independence, establishing the Later Zhao Kingdom, named to distinguish it from Liu Yao's state, and taking control of the rich North China plain. Shi Lei's Later Zhao became the dominant power in northern China, defeating remaining Jin forces and eventually capturing and executing Liu Yao in 329, absorbing the former Han Zhao territory. He became the founding emperor of Later Zhao, ruling almost all of northern China and establishing a powerful state that defined the early 16 Kingdoms period. In essence, Shi Lei transitioned from a rebel general within the Han Zhao to its ultimate conqueror, creating a more stable and powerful regime that dominated northern China for decades. In 330, Shi Lei assumed the title Heavenly King Tianwang and made his wife Lady Lu the queen and his son Shi Hong the crown prince. He granted another son, Shi Hong the Prince of Qin, the title Grand Chanyu as official leader of the 5 nomadic tribes under his rule. To consolidate his rule, Shi Lei enacted several policies with the help of Han Chinese ministers such as Zhang Bin. Among others, he reintroduced the 9-rank system, promoted agriculture, and emphasized education. He adopted the Grand Chanyu title, tasked with managing the tribes, while also introducing new offices that specifically dealt with litigations and population movements of the tribes. He banned the word Hu, opting to use Goren, countrymen, instead, and forbid the tribes from oppressing the Han Chinese scholar officials. During the Later Zhao Dynasty, 319 to 351 CE, its White Ji ruler, Shi Lei, and later Shi Hu, established distinct ethnic policies, separating non-Han, Jie, Tocharians, etc. from Han Chinese, even while using Han officials. This created a dual system for governance and controlling conquered groups, distinct from unified Han rule, establishing a precedent for ethnic differentiation. Shi Lei, the founder, maintained separate systems for the white Europoid Jie people and the Mongoloid Han Chinese populace, using Han officials like Zhang Bin for Han affairs. This caste system managed diverse populations and also reinforced ethnic distinctions, unlike the earlier Han Empire's ideal of shared identity, Han Chinese. In essence, later Zhao created a stratified society with administrative divisions between the white ruling elite and the majority Han Chinese, contrasting sharply with the Han Dynasty's efforts to solidify a unified Han identity. Additionally, Xi Lei was an important figure in the rise of Buddhism in 4th century China, as he allowed the Kushan monk Fotu Cheng to wield considerable influence in his court. As detailed in the writings of the Tocharian monk Fotu Cheng's writings, the Jie were Central Asian immigrants who were conquered by the Xiongnu Confederacy and then joined them. The relationship between Jie rulers Xi Lei and his son Shi Hu, Shi Jilong, was adoption, with Gao Seng Zhuan, biographies of distinguished monks, stating that his adopted son was from Jiban, i.e., Kabul of Afghanistan, which at this time was occupied by many Aryan groups such as the Kushans and Scythians. From monk Fotu Cheng's mouth, we could tell that the past of the Jie king, Shi Hu, or his ancestors, a merchant, previously attended a gathering in today's Afghanistan, on which occasion some priest claimed that the Jie merchant would one day rule the land of Jin China. Both Xi Lei and Shi Hu endorsed Buddhism by granting the Kushan Tocharian monk Fotu Cheng a privileged position within their government. This shows that white Tocharians from the Tarim Basin had also gained high positions in the later Zhao government. Buddhism was at first restricted to government officials, but as the religion became increasingly popular among commoners as well, Shi Hu promoted religious freedom, stating that his people have the right to worship the Buddha, who was a foreigner like him. Under later Zhao, the white Tocharian monk Fotu Cheng's teachings spread, and many Buddhist temples were built in northern China. Fotu Cheng, 232 to 348 CE, was a white Tocharian Buddhist monk and missionary from Kucha. He studied in Kashmir and arrived in the western Jin capital Luoyang in 310 CE and was active in the spread of Buddhism in China. Fotu Cheng came from Kucha to the western Jin dynasty in 310 CE and propagated Buddhism widely. He was supposedly said to have demonstrated many spiritual powers, perhaps through magic tricks, and was able to convert the warlords in this region of China over to Buddhism. The Tocharian monk Fotu Cheng succeeded in converting the Jie Sogdian warlord Xi Lei and became his closest advisor as he founded the later Zhao Dynasty in 319 CE. Fotu Cheng uttered the only phrase that reached us in the Jie language, cited in connection with Xi Lei's successful war against Liu Yao of former Zhao in 328 CE. Eventually, Fotu Cheng became a later Zhao government official under Shi Hu, who allowed him to found a great number of Buddhist temples. Among his disciples were Dao An, Zhu Faya, Zhu Fatai, Fa He, and Fa Chang. These disciples had a great impact on Buddhism in China and continued to revere the memory of their teacher. Fotu Cheng is well known for his teaching methods of meditation, especially anapanasmriti, mindfulness of breathing. Fotu Cheng widely taught anapanasmriti through methods of counting breaths so as to temper the breathing, simultaneously focusing the mind into a state of peaceful meditative concentration. By teaching meditation methods as well as doctrine, Fotu Cheng popularized Buddhism quickly. In his History of China, John Key writes, Fotu Cheng's disciples would include some of Chinese Buddhism's most outstanding scholars. When the later Zhao kingdom fell apart in 349, 4 princes were enthroned and murdered in that year alone. Fotu Cheng's disciples fanned out across the north from Shandong to Sichuan and gravitated south as far as Guangdong. One of them, the monk Dao An, became the greatest exponent, translator, and organizer in the early history of Chinese Buddhism, and of his disciples, several assisted Kumarajiva, another native of Kuka, in the most ambitious of all translation projects in terms of quantity and fidelity. Yet all such luminaries continued to revere Fotu Cheng's memory, which would suggest that he was more than a mere showman and miracle worker. A bronze Buddha statue created under the later Zhao in 338 has been discovered. It is the earliest known Buddha sculpture produced in China and possesses a tall nose bridge, deep-set eyes, and wavy hair. These traits match both the Jie people and Siddhartha Gautama himself. The Jie appeared to possess the Hutian Heaven Temple, which is thought to be a Zoroastrian temple. The Jie practiced cremation, which was notably a custom in the city-state of Chach in the western regions. Scholars have shown that the Jie believed in Sogdian Zoroastrianism, stating that there was a temple or altar in Ye called Hutian, which was the Chinese name for the Zoroastrian god, Ahura Mazda. Due to the veneration of fire in Zoroastrianism, another example they cite is the giant lamp that was built in Shi Hu's palace for his crowning ceremony as heavenly king. Xie Fei and Wei Mengbian were two mechanical engineers under the later Zhao who built a south-pointing chariot, also called south-pointing carriage, a directional compass vehicle that apparently did not use magnetic principle, but was operated by use of differential gears, which apply an equal amount of torque to driving wheels rotating at different speeds, or a similar angular differential principle. For the great ingenuity shown in the construction of the device, Shi Hu granted Xie Fei the noble title of Hao without land possessions and rewarded him generously. Shi Lei's nephew Shi Hu adopted Ran Jian, a Han Chinese boy, as his son and changed his name accordingly to Shi Jian and was later referred to as Ran Min. As Ran Min grew in age, Shi Hu became impressed by his bravery in battle and battlefield tactics, and he treated Shi Min as his own grandson. Shi Min, an adopted Han Chinese son of Jie's posterior Zhao, had at one time killed about 200,000 Jie. History recorded that the criteria used for sorting out the Jie was their tall nose bridge. History said that Shi Min's armies killed those people who looked like Jie because of their high nose bridge. After surviving multiple assassination attempts, Shi Min suspected that he could not trust the Jie and tribespeople in Ye. In 349, he ordered the killing of every Jie and Hu people, identifying them by their high noses and full beards. Shi Min personally led his soldiers to massacre the tribes in Ye, while his generals purged their armies of tribesmen. According to some sources, more than 200,000 of them were slain. As the non-Chinese tribes continued fleeing Yecheng, Ran Min realized that he would not be able to use the Jie and other Hu people, so he issued an order to the ethnic Han according to which each civil servant who killed one Hu and brought his head to him would be promoted in rank by 3 degrees, and a military officer would be transferred to the service at his supreme command. Ran Min himself led the Han in killing the Jie and Hu without regard for wealth, sex, or age. During the day, tens of thousands of heads were severed. Troop commanders in various parts of the state also received a rescript from Ran Min to purge the Hu soldiers under their command. In total, over 200,000 people were killed. It was recorded that corpses were piled outside the city walls, where they were all eaten by jackals, wolves, and wild dogs. This massacre by Ran Min had a very adverse effect on the ethnic Jie population. In the first month of the year of 350 CE, Ran Min wanted to eliminate the traces of the Shi family and used the prophecy of, "After Zhao, come Li," as an excuse to change the country's name to Wei, change his own surname to Li, implement a general amnesty, and change the reign era to Qinglong. Ran Min deposed and killed Shi Jian along with 38 of Shi Hu's grandsons. The Shi clan in Yecheng was completely wiped out. In 351, the final ruler of later Zhao, Shi Jian, and his family were massacred in Shangguo, bringing the dynasty to an end. The last member of the Shi clan fled to the eastern Jin in Jiankang, but was executed upon his arrival. Because of Ran Min's 3-year brutal reign, massacring the Jie people, he had gained sympathy from the ethnic Han population who had seen this as a divine retribution against those who had ruled the Han people earlier. Ran Min's forces fell into a Xianbei ambush. Their armored cavalry shattered the Chinese lines, and General Ran Min was captured alive. Former Yan's forces delivered him to Murongjun. Before he was executed, he was asked why he had killed the Jie rulers of later Zhao. He replied, "If brute barbarians like you can become emperors, why not I, a descendant of the Yellow Emperor?" Han Chinese call themselves Hua Xia, meaning descendant of the Yellow Emperor, Huang Di. Even though the Yellow Emperor legend was actually created by the Zhou Dynasty's elite, who were not Han people. Ran Min insulted Murongjun, and so Murong had him whipped 300 times and then executed. The remaining Jie people eventually became subjects of the Xianbei-led former Yan, Mongolians, who defeated Ran Min and conquered the Hebei and Shandong regions. The Jie then adopted the Mongolic language of the Xianbei, contributing to descriptions of yellow-headed Xianbei. This is why there are descriptions of blonde Xianbei. These people with diverse hair colors were actually Jie Sogdians, Dingling Scythians, and Yenisei Kyrgyz, Turkized Scythians, who adopted the Mongolic language of the Xianbei. Many of them had become slaves of the Xianbei. Jie warriors were incorporated into Xianbei armies, and some of them had high military positions. Dingling Scytho-Siberian founders of Zhai Wei. The Dingling were a nomadic people that originally lived south of Lake Baikal and were vassals of the Xiongnu Empire. The Dingling were an ancient people who appear in Chinese historiography in the context of the 1st century BCE. Modern archaeologists have identified the Dingling as belonging to the eastern Scythian horizon, namely the Tagar culture. The ethnonym Dingling is regarded by modern scholars in the Western world as being interchangeable with the ethnonym Tila, who are believed to be the descendants of the Dingling. Chinese historiographers believed that Tila was a mistaken transcription, related them to the ancient Red D, and recorded various names like Dili, Gauch, or Chile. Several modern scholars, including Peter B. Golden, now believe that all of these ethnonyms described by the Chinese all derive from Altaic exonyms describing wheeled vehicles, with Dingling perhaps being an earlier rendering of a Tuoba word, tegreg, meaning wagon. Peter Golden also wrote that Gauch or high carts may be a translation of Dingling et al. Edwin Pullyblank writes that high cart is just one of several variations of exonyms that ultimately reflect the original Turkic meaning of Dingling, which is possibly derived from tegreg, meaning circle, hoop. The Wiley mentioned 3 Dingling groups, one group south of Majing, literally horse-shanked people, north of Kangju and west of Wusan, another south of the North Sea, identified as Lake Baikal, and another north of Xiongnu and neighboring the Kushi, Hunyun, Gekun, and Shinli, all of whom had once been conquered by the Xiongnu. There is evidence that the Dingling looked like European people, based on their identification with the Tagar culture of the Altai region in Siberia. In the 20th century, several historians proposed that the Tagar people were characterized by a high frequency of light hair and light eyes, and that the associated Dingling were blonde-haired. Genetic testing of fossils from the Tagar culture has confirmed the theory that they were often blue-eyed and light-haired. 21st century scholars continue to describe the Dingling in a similar manner. Adrian Mayer repeated N. Ishjant's description, 1994, of the Dingling as red-haired, blue-eyed giants, while M. V. Dorina called the Dingling European-looking. The new book also relates that the Yenisei Kyrgyz, Turkicized Scythians, intermixed with the Dingling. Murphy, 2003, proposes that the Dingling's country had been in the Minusinsk Basin on the Yenisei River, thus close to the location of the Dingling group who neighbored the Kangju, Wusun, and Majing people. Dingling gradually moved southward to Mongolia and northern China. They were a huge independent horde for centuries, but were later defeated and temporarily became subject of the Xiongnu Empire. One group, known as the West Dingling, remained in an area that would become Kazakhstan, while others, expelled from Mongolia by the Ruran, settled in the Tarim Basin during the 5th century and took control of Turpan. Eastern Scythian carts used by the Pazyryk culture had tall wheels. These same carts were later used by the Dingling and other Scythian nomads, which provides evidence of cultural continuity between the Scythians and the Dingling. The Dingling had a warlike society formed by traders, hunters, fishers, and gatherers, living a semi-nomadic life in the southern Siberian mountain taiga region from Lake Baikal to northern Mongolia. Some ancient sources claim that D or Zhai was adopted as the group name because the Zhai family had been the ruling house for centuries. Other sources claim that they might have been correlated with the Guifang, a northern tribe that appears in the oracle bone inscriptions from Yinshu. To the north of the Xiongnu Empire and Dingling territories, at the headwaters of the Yenisei around Tanu-Uriankai, lived the Gekun, also known as the Yenisei Kyrgyz in later records. Further to the west near the Irtysh River lived the Huji. Other tribes living among the Xiongnu, such as the Hunyu, Kush, and Shinli, were only mentioned once in Chinese records, and their exact location is unknown. During the 2nd century BCE, The Dingling became subjects of Modu Chanyu along with 26 other tribes, including the Yuezhi and Wusun. Dingling and Xiongnu. The Dingling were first subjugated by the Xiongnu, but the latter gradually weakened. In 71 BCE, after numerous conflicts between the Chinese and the Xiongnu, the Dingling, led by Zhi Qian, with help from neighboring tribes, took the opportunity to revolt. From 63 to 60 BCE, during a split within the Xiongnu ruling clan of Luanti, the Dingling attacked the Xiongnu, together with the Wusun from the west, supported by the Chinese from the south and the Wuhuan from the southeast. In 51 BCE, the Dingling, together with the Huji and Gikun, were defeated by the Xiongnu under Zhi Qian on his way to Kangju. Over the next century, there may have been more uprisings, but the only recorded one was in the year 85, when together with the Xianbei they made their final attack on the Xiongnu, and Dingling regained its power under Jia Ying. After that, under Dingling pressure, the remaining northern Xiongnu and the Tuoba formed the confederacy by Xianbei chief Tan Shihui. After his death in 181, the Xianbei moved south, and the Dingling took their place on the steppe. Some groups of Dingling, called the West Dingling by the ancient Chinese, started to migrate into Western Asia, but settled in Kangju, modern-day Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. There is no specific source to tell where exactly they settled, but some claim Lake Zaisen. A branch of the Dingling migrated west and resided in Kangju, becoming known as the Western Dingling before moving into China. During the 16 Kingdoms period, the Zhai clan of the Western Dingling were one of the earliest groups to rebel against the former Qin after their defeat at the Battle of Fei River, and in 388 they founded the short-lived Zhai Wei dynasty. The Zhai Wei, also known as the Wei state, was a short-lived state during the 16 Kingdoms period in China. It was founded by the Zhai clan, who were leaders of the Dingling people. Led by Zhai Bin and later Zhai Liao, the Dingling established their center in the Henan region. The Zhai Wei dynasty was the political manifestation of the Dingling people after their migration into the Chinese heartland. The dynasty was eventually destroyed by the later Yan. The Dingling that remained behind on the northern steppes were later known as the Chile Gauchar-Tile people. The Zhai clan were Dingling people who once resided in Kangju, Sogdiana, in the western regions for generations before migrating into China. Their first recorded leader was Zhai Shu, who was living with his followers around Zhongshan and Changshan commanderies during the fall of western Jin. The Zhai later became subjects of the Sogdian Ji peoples Yuvan. Later Zhao Dynasty, with their chieftain, Zhai Bin, receiving the title of Prince of Gaoting. They later submitted to the former Yan and adopted the Xianbei's Mongolic language. They and other white groups among the Xianbei would later be referred to as Yellow-Headed Xianbei. In 371, after the Yan was conquered by the former Qin, Zhai Bin and his people were forcibly relocated to Shinan and Mianchi in the east, a decision that sparked discontent among the Dingling. The Aryan path of Kumarajiva. Kumarajiva, 344 to 413 CE, was a Tocharian Buddhist monk, scholar, missionary, and translator from Kucha, present-day Aksu Prefecture, Xinjiang, China. Kumarajiva is seen as one of the greatest translators of Chinese Buddhism. According to Lu Cheng, Kumarajiva's translations are unparalleled either in terms of translation technique or degree of fidelity. Kumarajiva first studied teachings of the Sarvastivadin schools, later studied under Buddhisvamin, and finally became an adherent of Mahayana Buddhism, studying the Madhyamaka doctrine of Nagarjuna. After mastering the Chinese language, Kumarajiva settled as a translator and scholar in Chang'an, 401 CE, under the patronage of the later Qin dynasty during the 16 Kingdoms period. He was the head of a team of translators which included his amanuensis Senghui. This team was responsible for the translation of many Sanskrit Buddhist texts into Chinese. Kumarajiva also introduced the Madhyamaka school of Buddhist philosophy into China, which would later be called Sanlun, the Three-Treatise School. Kumarajiva was born in the kingdom of Kucha in the Tarim Basin in 344 CE. His father was a Kushan monk called Kumarayana, who was probably from Kashmir, while his mother, Jiva, was a member of the Tocharian royal family of Kucha. Himself an eminent Buddhist monk, Kumarayana endeavored to journey from Kashmir to China to spread his Buddhist teachings. After crossing the Pamir Mountains, Kumarayana stopped in Kucha, where he stayed as a guest of the king. The king of Kucha was so impressed with Kumarayana's ideas that the king proposed the marriage of his younger sister Jiva, also known as Jivaka, a Kushan princess and herself a devout Buddhist, to Kumarayana. Kumarayana and Jiva both acquiesced to this marriage. It was therefore that Kumarajiva's father Kumarayana settled in Kucha, became the royal priest, met Kumarajiva's mother Jiva, who influenced both his own subsequent Buddhist studies and later those of their son, and thereafter begat Kumarajiva. When Kumarajiva was just 7, his mother Jiva joined the Chioli nunnery north of Kucha. Beginning at the age of 9, Kumarajiva studied the Agamas and the Sarvastivada Abhidharma under Kushan and Tocharian masters in North India, Kashmir, and Kucha, all centers of Sarvastivada monasticism and scholarship. He later converted to and studied Mahayana under the Kashmirian Buddhayashas in Kashgar. In Kucha at the age of 20, Kumarajiva received full monastic ordination. Around this time, he also began to study the Sarvastivada Vinaya and the Madhyamaka philosophy. Over his early life, Kumarajiva became a famous figure in Buddhism, known for his breadth of studies and skill in debate. In 379 CE, Kumarajiva's fame reached China when a Chinese Buddhist monk named Seng Jun visited Kucha and described Kumarajiva's abilities. Efforts were then made by Emperor Fujian of the former Qin dynasty to bring Kumarajiva to the Qin capital of Chang'an. To do this, his general Lu Guang was dispatched with an army in order to conquer Kucha and return with Kumarajiva. Fujian is recorded as telling his general, "Send me Kumarajiva as soon as you conquer Kucha." However, when Fujian's main army at the capital was defeated, his general Lu Guang declared his own state and became a warlord in 386 CE, and had Kumarajiva captured when he was around 40 years old. Being a non-Buddhist, Lu Guang had Kumarajiva imprisoned for many years, essentially as booty. During this time, it is thought that Kumarajiva became familiar with the Chinese language. Kumarajiva was also coerced by Lu into marrying the Kucha king's daughter, and so he was forced to give up his monk's vows. After the Yao family of later Qin overthrew the previous ruler Fujian, the ruler Yao Xing made repeated pleas to the warlords of the Lu family to free Kumarajiva and send him east to Chang'an. When the Lu family would not free Kumarajiva from their hostage, an exasperated Yao Xing had armies dispatched to Liangzhou in order to defeat the warlords of the Lu family and to have Kumarajiva brought back to them. Finally, the armies of Emperor Yao succeeded in defeating the Lu family, and Kumarajiva was brought east to the capital of Chang'an in 401 CE. At Chang'an, Kumarajiva was introduced to the Emperor Yao Xing, the court, and the Buddhist leaders. He became famous and well-respected in China, being given the title of National Preceptor, Guoshi. At Chang'an, Kumarajiva led a court-sponsored translation team of scholars who worked on translating numerous Sanskrit Buddhist texts into the Chinese language. Yao Xing looked upon him as his own teacher, and many young and old Chinese Buddhists flocked to him, learning both from his direct teachings and through his translation bureau activities at the Xiaoyao Gardens, where daily sessions were held, attended by over 1,000 monks. Within a dozen years, Kumarajiva's translation bureau had translated about 35 sutras in 294 scrolls. His translations are still in use today in Chinese Buddhism. Kumarajiva had 4 main disciples who worked on his team: Dao Sheng, Sengjiao, Daorong, and Senghui. Kumarajiva, the great Buddhist translator, was sometimes called a Hu Nu or barbarian monk by some Chinese, reflecting his white Central Asian origins from Kucha, but he was revered as a master scholar, known as a learned bhiksu monk, and for his Sanskrit name meaning youth of long life, also translating to Tong Shou, youth in Chinese, signifying his profound wisdom and pivotal role in bringing Mahayana Buddhism to China. Kumarajiva revolutionized Chinese Buddhism, and his team's translation style is known for its clarity and for overcoming the previous Gei, concept-matching system of translation which matched Buddhist terminology with Taoist and Confucian terms. Kumarajiva's readable translation style was distinctive, possessing a flowing smoothness that reflects his prioritization on conveying the meaning as opposed to precise literal rendering. Because of this, his renderings of seminal Mahayana texts have often remained more popular than later, more literal translations. Kumarajiva had translated many sutras and treatises. Kumarajiva and his team also translated some treatises on meditation, dhyana. In the Taisho Tripitaka, Vol 15, 5 meditation works are attributed to Kumarajiva. Kumarajiva is also known to have authored a few original works, including his commentary on the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra, Zhu Weimo Jie Jing, Taisho number 1775, and the Shixiang Lun, Treatise on Tattva. Kumarajiva and his team are also responsible for a biography of Nagarjuna, which may have been based on Kumarajiva's own accounts to his students. Another text which contains some original teachings by Kumarajiva is the Jumo Luoshi Fa Shidayi, the great teaching of Dharma Master Kumarajiva, which is a series of letters between Kumarajiva and Lushan Huyuan discussing some basic Mahayana topics. According to Rafal Felber, the translations associated with his name, executed both from Prakrits, i.e. vernacular forms of Sanskrit, and from early forms of Buddhist Sanskrit into a form of classical Chinese, have enjoyed enormous success in the Sinitic tradition. This success is so great that even when, in the subsequent centuries, other scholars produced new and supposedly improved translations of the same texts, it has been the Kumarajiva versions that have remained in use in the devotional, exegetical, and literary life of East Asia up to the present day. In the 20th and 21st centuries, as the Sinitic Buddhist traditions have contributed to the emergence of a distinctly global modernist Buddhism, the Kumarajiva corpus of early 5th century translations has been an implicit major presence. Aside from the linguistic and terminological influence of Kumarajiva's translation work, his work also influenced the philosophical understanding of Buddhism in China. According to Fan Muyo, before Kumarajiva, many Chinese Buddhists had serious misunderstandings of emptiness and not self. This is because they had been influenced by Neo-Taoist Xuanxue philosophy, and thus they saw emptiness as either a kind of non-being, as a real or absolute substance. Kumarajiva recognized these errors and worked to correct them by introducing proper interpretations based on Madhyamaka philosophy. Yellow-haired slaves of the Xianbei Barbarians. In Chinese literature, there are many intriguing descriptions of white Xianbei and yellow-headed Xianbei, which can be found throughout different eras of Chinese history. These groups appear to be white slaves who were mostly descended from the Scythian tribes of southern Siberia. They had adopted the Mongolic language of the Xianbei, while groups in other areas like the Yenisei Kyrgyz and Dingling had adopted Turkic languages. Some of the Jie minority had mixed with these Scythian slave groups instead of the Chinese or Xianbei. These Scythian Jie slaves and low castes were often conflated with the Xianbei themselves by Chinese authors. Of course, this is not to say that all of these groups had a low social status. Some of them would later gain higher positions in Xianbei society, particularly the Jie people. When an Eastern Jin minister, Wang Dun, rebelled against Emperor Mingdi in AD 322 to 325, he called the emperor by a derogatory name of Huang Shu Nu of the Xianbei, meaning the yellow-haired slave of the Xianbei barbarians. This is because Mingdi's mother was from the Dai prefecture, i.e. the Yanmenguan Pass area in today's Shanxi, where the Xianbei had a dominant presence. The document Jiji Tongjian, it means Comprehensive Mirror for Aid in Government, was presented to the emperor during the Song Dynasty by Sima Guang, 1019 to 1086. He had spent 18 years composing it. Here is told a story that the emperor of the dynasty Eastern Jin, Jin Mingdi, Sima Shao 323 to 326 AC, had yellow hair and beard because his mother was a part of the Xianbei Confederation's Scythian concubines. Once he went out to inspect his troops. However, because of the color of his hair, his soldiers believed he was a Xianbei and chased him as an enemy. The mother of Emperor Ming of Jin, Lady Shun, was a lowly concubine of Xianbei, Scythian slave stock. During a confrontation between Emperor Ming and a rebel force in 324, his enemies were confused by his appearance and thought he was a Xianbei due to his yellow beard. Emperor Ming's yellowish hair could have been inherited from his mother, who was a Mongolized Scythian concubine. Lady Shun was a concubine of Emperor Yuan of Jin Sima Rui while he was the Prince of Langi. Initially, he favored her greatly. The couple had two sons, Sima Xiao, Emperor Ming, and Sima Po. Because of the favor that she received, Sima Rui's wife, Princess Yu Mengmu, was very jealous of her and mistreated her. Lady Shun, not happy about her low station and Princess Yu's mistreatment, often complained and was rebuked by Prince Rui. Eventually, he threw her out of the household. After Sima Xiao succeeded to the throne as Emperor Ming in January 323, he gave her a mansion and called her the Lady of Jianan. Later that year, he welcomed her back to the palace. After he died in October 325 and his son Emperor Cheng ascended the throne, she was treated as virtual Empress Dowager without the title, and she probably effectively raised Emperor Cheng, since Emperor Cheng's mother Yu Wenjun died in 328 in the midst of the Su Jun disturbance, while Emperor Cheng was only 7. She died in 335 and was posthumously called the Lady of Yuzhang, and a temple was built for her. Some sources mention that she was from the Xianbei confederacies and that Sima Xiao inherited her exotic Scythian looks. Folk songs from back then sounded Huang To Xianbei, which means Xianbei have yellow head. The Tang Dynasty poet Zhang Ji had described some of the Xianbei people as yellow-headed Xianbei in A Journey to Yongjia. The Book of Jin states that in the state of Chao Wei, Xianbei immigrants were known as the White Tribe. This is probably because the white Scythian tribes had stood out more from a Han perspective, even though the majority of the Xianbei were not white. But the Xianbei themselves may have also been more light-skinned than the Han Chinese on average. The Xianbei as a whole became stereotyped as white. During the Tang Dynasty, the poet Zhang Ji described the Xianbei entering Luoyang as yellow-headed. During the Song Dynasty, the poet and painter Su Shi was inspired by a painting of a Xianbei riding a horse and wrote a poem describing an elderly Xianbei with reddish hair and blue eyes. Su Shi had wrote about red-haired and blue-eyed Lao Xianbei. Su Dongpo had described the red-bearded and bluish-eyed old Xianbei from his poem Shuhan Gan Ma. Historian Edward H. Schaeffer believes many of the Xianbei were blondes, but others, such as Charles Holcomb, think it is likely that the bulk of the Xianbei were not visibly very different in appearance from the general population of northeastern Asia. Chinese historians describe some Huangtou Xianbei warriors as white or blonde with blue eyes or red-haired in various Chinese sources, such as the Book of the Jinshu. Deng Ai 197–264 AD, the general of the Cao Wei kingdom, decided to relocate tens of thousands of Xianbei warriors to the Gansu area and also to mix them with the locals so that they would become less bloodthirsty. He called them the White Troops, Baibu. Jinshu 47:22. During the mid-2nd century AD, the Murong Xianbei were called white, and the women were often praised by the Han Chinese leaders for their fairness. Another description is in the poem of Zhang Ji, 712–779 AD, who writes, "The yellow-headed Xianbei entered Luoyang." Viewing the paintings of Han Gang, 706–783 AD, Su Dongpo, 1037–1101 AD, the famous Northern Song Dynasty poet, described a Xianbei figure riding a horse, the elder Xianbei with reddish beard and blue eyes. Following records of Huangtou Yellowhead Xianbei, there were Huangtou Yellowhead Shui during the Mongols' time frame and Huangtou Yellowhead Jurchen during the Jinjin time period. In the Tang Dynasty, poet Du Fu had a sentence to the effect of calling Huangtou Shi-er, i.e. a yellow-headed man of the Shi tribe. And in Emperor Fujian of anterior Qin Dynasty AD 351–394 referred to the Xianbei rebels as Bai Lu, namely white enemies. Historians, including Tai Dongfan, said that the Xianbei had possessed lighter skin. Ming-Qing dynastic printing houses, which compiled China's 25 chronicles into commonly readable series, had pointed out that the Jin dynasty wealthy in northern China liked to buy Xianbei women as concubines for the tall height of those women, likely Scythian women. Having interpreted Huang Shunu of the Xianbei as the yellow-haired slave of the Xianbei, it appears that the Europoid Scythians were originally slaves, low castes, and mercenaries of the Xianbei after submitting to them. but some of them had eventually gained higher positions as well. In the eyes of the Qiang Di people, northerners like the Xianbei themselves might possess a lighter skin tone. Today's Tibetans and Qiangs in Sichuan do possess darker complexions. Using modern science, we could attribute the shade difference among southern and northern Mongolian stock people to different levels of ultraviolet exposure. In any case, you could not bundle the two epithets of Huang Shu and Bai Lu, white enemy, but to interpret the two epithets separately. Otherwise, a wrong conclusion could be reached. Some of the white Scythian and Jie people among the Xianbei had migrated to more isolated areas, while others mixed with the Xianbei and Han. Later Xianbei people displayed limited amounts of admixture with so-called late Xiongnu Sarmatian-like groups, Europoids. So far, Western steppe herder ancestry was only found at low amounts or absent entirely among the different Xianbei remains, average at 7%, but this is based on limited samples. Jie people and the Xianbei's Dingling slaves have never been genetically tested. These would likely show predominant Western steppe herder ancestry. West Eurasian admixture was likely much higher among certain Xianbei individuals who appear to have had mixed ancestry from mixing with Jie Dingling Shiwei-related groups. Several paintings of the Tuoba Xianbei Northern Zhou General Li Xian depict him as having mixed Eurasian traits and a tall, slender nose bridge. It should be noted that Li Xian was not related to the Northern Zhou's rulers who were of Mongoloid Yuan descent, former Xiongnu subjects. Li Xian's descendants were the founders of the Tang Dynasty, whose contemporary mural paintings, such as the one from the east wall of Mogao Cave 220, Dunhuang, had also depicted mixed racial traits. The two men standing behind Emperor Taizong could even be fully Europoid, while some short-statured Han servants can be seen in the right of the painting fanning their mixed-race overlords with large fans. Reproductions of paintings of Emperor Taizong made in the following dynasties are not accurate depictions. The Han Chinese artists of the Song and later dynasties had projected their own features onto Taizong. The Longxi Li were claimed as ancestors by the imperial house of the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, through a different line. The Tang imperial house may have actually descended from an eastern lineage, the Zhaojun Li, who intermarried extensively with the non-Chinese northwestern tribal aristocracy. The probable Tuoba Xianbei origins of Li Xian, as revealed by his epitaph, has led to some scholars suggesting that the rulers of the Tang Dynasty had barbarian patrilineal ancestors, rather than having Han patrilineal ancestors. It is already known that the Sui and Tang royal family had Turco-Mongol and Indo-European heritage from marrying Xianbei women, but many scholars have now shown that they modified their genealogy to conceal a Xianbei paternal lineage while preserving various Xianbei customs. Or in other words, they had actually faked their Han ancestry to legitimize their rule. Ancient Turks called the Tang rulers Tabgak, which is the Turkic form of Tuoba, the name of the Xianbei clan that founded the Northern Wei dynasty. This shows Turks recognized the Tang imperial family's lineage from the Tuoba, suggesting the Tang dynasty had deep nomadic roots. The Tuoba were a prominent Xianbei group who established the Northern Wei dynasty 386 to 534 CE in northern China. When the Tang dynasty rose, Turkic inscriptions, like the Orkhon inscriptions, referred to them as Tabgach, indicating they saw the Tang emperors as successors to the Tuoba rulers. The Tang imperial family had significant links to northern nomadic groups, including the Tuoba. The Tibetan Empire had also recognized the connection between the Tang aristocracy and the Tuoba Xianbei, as shown by documents from the Dunhuang Library Cave. Next, we'll examine the Western influence on early Chinese Buddhist art. Western influence on Chinese Buddhist art. Early Chinese Buddhist caves, starting around the 4th century, include the famous Mogao caves Dunhuang, Yungang grottos, Datong, Longmen grottos, Luoyang, and Maijishan grottos, Tianshui. These were very heavily influenced by the Tocharians' Buddhist art from the Kizil caves, Xinjiang, the earliest complex. The Chinese caves show Central Asian-influenced art which evolved in style from the northern dynasties through the Tang dynasty. The construction of the Mogao caves is generally taken to have begun sometime in the 4th century CE, when Dunhuang was under control of the former Liang dynasty. According to a book written during the reign of Tang Empress Wu, Foken Ji, An Account of Buddhist Shrines, by Li Junshu, a Buddhist monk named Lezun, which may also be pronounced Yuezun, supposedly had a vision of 1,000 Buddhas bathed in golden light at the site in 366 CE, possibly brought about by the use of psychedelic mushrooms or other drugs, inspiring him to build a cave here. The Buddhist monk Lezun did not have a personal surname that is recorded in the traditional accounts of his life. Buddhist monks had typically renounced their original family names upon ordination. He was a Saka Tocharian monk from the Tarim Basin who founded the first Mogao cave while he was traveling near Dunhuang, a Silk Road hub. He was later joined by a second monk, Fa Liang, and the site gradually grew. By the time of the northern Liang, a small community of monks had formed at the site. The caves initially served only as a place of meditation for hermit monks, but developed to serve the monasteries that sprang up nearby. The earliest decorated Mogao caves remaining to this day, caves 268, 272, and 275, were built and decorated in the northern Liang period between 419 and 439 CE, before the invasion of the Northern Wei. They share many stylistic characteristics in common with some of the Kizil caves, such as Cave 17. Members of the ruling family of Northern Wei and Northern Zhou then had many caves constructed here, and it flourished in the short-lived Sui dynasty. By the Tang dynasty, the number of caves had reached over 1,000. Sculpture and murals from Mogao Cave 254, built during the Northern Wei period between 475 and 490 CE, is one of the earliest caves in Dunhuang and shows parallels with the Tocharian Kizil caves of the Tarim Basin. Both Indic and Europoid features and Western influences can be found throughout the statues and murals of the Mogao caves. Figure of Maitreya Buddha in Cave 275 from northern Liang, 397 to 439, one of the earliest caves, depicts the Buddha as a crossed-ankled figure with a three-disc crown. It shows influence from Kushan art and has Europoid facial features, tall, slender nose, angular traits, etc. Many paintings from these caves also possess white and Indian racial traits. The founders of the northern Liang dynasty during the 16 Kingdoms period were the Juk tribe, a Mongoloid group who were previously part of the Xiongnu Confederacy. They were strong propagators of Buddhism, and it was during the northern Liang that the first Buddhist cave shrine sites with murals and statues appear in Gansu province. The two most famous cave sites are Tiantishan, Celestial Ladder Mountain, which was south of the northern Liang capital at Yongcheng, and Wenshushan, Manjusri's mountain, halfway between Yongcheng and Dunhuang. Maijishan lies more or less on a main route connecting China proper and Central Asia, approximately 150 miles, 240 kilometers west of modern Xi'an, just south of the Wei River. It had the additional advantage of being located not too distant from a main route that also ran north to south to Chengdu and the Indian subcontinent. The northern Liang also hired artists from the Tarim Basin and Central Asia to build and decorate the first decorated Mogao caves, caves 268, 272, and 275 from 419 to 439 CE until the Northern Wei invasion. This is why they have many common points and were built at the same time as Cave 17 of the Kizil caves. Even during the later Tang period, many foreign-looking white and Indian Buddhist characters would continue to be portrayed in some Mogao cave murals. The Buddhist Heavenly King statues became very popular during the Tang dynasty. These Heavenly King statues are often very Europoid. They have large round eyes, prominent noses, and large woolly full beards and mustaches. The Yungang grottos are ancient Buddhist temple grottos built during the Northern Wei dynasty near the city of Datong, then called Pingcheng, in the province of Shaanxi. They are excellent examples of rock-cut architecture and one of the three most famous ancient Buddhist sculptural sites of China. The large statues of the Buddha found at these sites accurately portray him with very white Europoid traits. The statues have tall, prominent noses and deep-set eyes. Once again, the artist influence from Central Asia is very evident. The Northern Wei emperors had hired some white Central Asian artists to work on these statues and murals alongside local artists. These Buddha statues are thought to depict the Northern Wei emperors themselves. However, it's unlikely that the Mongoloid Xianbei emperors would have actually resembled these Europoid Buddha statues. It was just a way for the emperors to claim divine connection with Buddha. Maijishan grottos, Tianshui, Gansu, are known for its unique cliff-face sculptures and caves which date back to the northern dynasties. Construction started under the later Qin and continued under the western Qin. Many of the statues show varying degrees of Western artistic influences and facial features. Central Asian artists were likely involved in their construction. Longmen grottos, Luoyang Henan, were started in the Northern Wei dynasty, late 5th century, and expanded significantly under the Tang, featuring intricate carvings and statues along the Yi River. The statues from these caves start to mix Mongoloid and Europoid traits in an unusual manner, making them rather unrealistic looking. The largest Buddha statue is believed to have been modeled after Empress Wu Zetian. Like other Tang dynasty rulers, she also had mixed-race ancestry, and therefore the Caucasoid traits of this statue and others could potentially be accurate. Reproductions made in future dynasties did not portray her accurately. During her reign, 684 to 704 CE, Empress Wu Zetian decreed that the swastika symbol be formally adopted into the Chinese writing system as a character pronounced as Wan, meaning 10,000 or myriad. The empress was a devout Buddhist, and incorporating the swastika, an ancient Aryan symbol of the sun, which symbolizes the Buddha's auspicious marks and wisdom, into her lexicon was a way to embed symbols of Buddhist sanctity into her regime. She also decreed that the swastika would be used as an alternative symbol of the sun. Essentially, Wu Zetian formalized the swastika's role as a pervasive and powerful symbol of good fortune and infinity. Over time, more Mongoloid depictions of Buddha began to replace the older Caucasoid depictions. But now we'll shift our focus back to the northern and southern dynasties era. Xianbei domination of northern China. In the early 5th century, China entered a period known as the Northern and Southern Dynasties, in which parallel regimes ruled the northern and southern halves of the country. In the south, the eastern Jin gave way to the Liu Song, southern Qi, Liang, and finally Chen. Each of these southern dynasties were led by Han Chinese ruling families and used Jiankang, modern Nanjing, as the capital. In the north, the last of the 16 kingdoms was extinguished in 439 by the Northern Wei, a kingdom founded by the Xianbei, a nomadic people of mostly northern East Asian descent with some white and mixed-race minority groups who had unified northern China. The Northern Wei eventually split into the Eastern and Western Wei, which then became the Northern Qi and Northern Zhou. Most of these regimes were dominated by Xianbei, other than the Northern Zhou, which was founded by a distinct Mongoloid Yuan tribe of Xiongnu origin. During this period, most Xianbei people adopted Han surnames, though they continued many Xianbei customs, a strategy to legitimize their rule. The Siberian Mongolic-speaking Xianbei horsemen from northern Asia had looked down upon the Han Chinese during their rule and had considered them to be inferior. Emperor Wudi Tai had said, "The Chinese are foot soldiers, and we are soldiers on horseback." This emphasizes the perceived superiority of the nomadic fighting style and their disdain for the Chinese infantry's capabilities. The Xianbei Tuoba people were conquerors and master people, and they formed the core of the military. It was not the case that the Chinese were slaves, but they had clearly an inferior status, just as the peasants had in medieval France. Northern Wei art came under the influence of Central Asian traditions through trade routes. A white Central Asian named Antong, a descendant of the Parthian Buddhist missionary An Shigao, was political counselor to the first Northern Wei emperor Tuoba Guai, 370 to 409. Most importantly for Chinese art history, the Wei rulers converted to Buddhism and became great patrons of Buddhist arts. Numerous Central Asian objects have been found in northern Wei tombs, such as the tomb of Feng Hetu. It is believed that the main influx of Western objects among the northern Wei followed the defeat of the Ruan circa 450 CE, which allowed for the visit of diplomatic and mainly merchant caravans. Also, when the Northern Wei defeated the Northern Liang in 439 CE, they captured a great number of Sogdian merchants from their capital Wuwei and resettled them in their own capital at Datong, thereby fostering trade. Buddhism spread very far throughout the land during this time, particularly in northern China, due to the domination of foreign non-Han groups. In southern China, fierce debates about whether Buddhism should be allowed were held frequently by the royal court and nobles. Ji warriors of Northern Wei terracotta soldiers in Xianbei uniform from the tomb of Sima Jinlong depict racially diverse soldiers. The horse riders have tall noses, Europoid features, full beards, and pointed caps. These are likely Jie warriors incorporated into the Xianbei armies. They sharply contrast with the short-statured, flat-faced, flat-nosed, Mongoloid Xianbei figures with round headdresses. Zhu Rong, c. 493, November 1, 530, courtesy name Tianbao, formerly Prince Wu of Jin, was a general of the Xianbei-led Chinese Northern Wei Dynasty. Zhu Rong's ancestors were hereditary chiefs of the Qihu tribe of Jie extraction, and they used Zhu as their family name after settling on Zhu River, modern Jujia River, Shanxi. Zhu Rong's great-great-grandfather, Zhu Yujian, had assisted Northern Wei's founding emperor, Emperor Daowu, in his campaigns, and therefore was granted the Shurong region, in modern Shuozhou, Shanxi, as the Zhu's hereditary domain. There, the Zhus practiced husbandry and became extremely wealthy from the accumulation of livestock. Zhu Rong himself was born in 493, during the reign of Emperor Xiaowen. When Zhu Rong's father Zhu Xinqing grew old, Zhu Xinqing asked that the chief post be passed to Zhu Rong, and the imperial government agreed. Zhu Rong was described to be a pale-skinned man who was handsome, resolute, ambitious, and capable in military matters, and was particularly strict in military discipline. As he saw the empire begin to degrade during Emperor Xiaoming's reign, he began to consider whether the empire would collapse, and he sold part of his livestock to gather brave warriors around him. Zhu Rong's Jie warriors, a military force primarily composed of ethnic Jie people under his command, were later absorbed into the Xianbei army led by Gao Huan, who eventually founded the Northern Qi dynasty, effectively becoming a key component of his military power base following Zhu Rong's death and the subsequent power vacuum in northern China. The Jie people were known for their fierce fighting abilities and were often used as military units by various Chinese dynasties. Zhu Rong, a powerful military leader during the Northern Wei dynasty, had a large contingent of Jie warriors under his control. Zhu Rong, 493 to 530, a powerful Xianbei general of Jie descent in the Northern Wei dynasty, had rose from a wealthy tribal chief to become the de facto military dictator of the state. In 528, after Empress Dowager Hu poisoned the young Emperor Xiaoming, Zhu Rong marched on the capital Luoyang, overthrew her regime, drowned her and the puppet child emperor, and installed Yuan Ziyou as Emperor Xiaozhuang. To secure his power, he orchestrated the infamous Heian massacre, slaughtering over 2,000 imperial officials. Despite his brutality, Zhu proved an exceptionally skilled commander who never lost a battle. He rapidly reunified the fractured Northern Wei Empire by crushing major rebellions, defeating leaders like Ge Rong, Yuan Hao, a Liang-backed rival emperor, and Moqi Chonu, restoring central control over vast territories. Zhu dominated the court through allies and retained real power while publicly deferring to Emperor Xiaozhuang. Fearing eventual usurpation, Emperor Xiaozhuang lured Zhu to the palace in 530 under false pretenses and had him assassinated. Zhu's clan retaliated, defeating and killing Emperor Xiaozhuang soon after. Historians often praise Zhu Rong's unparalleled military talent and contributions to stabilizing the dynasty, as recorded in the official Wei Shu. While the Chinese author Yang Xuanji had to be very careful to avoid derogatory references to the Xianbei, who still held power when he wrote his books, there was one ethnic group on which he could focus his hatred. They were the Zhu, Sogdians. He talked about the family background of the Zhu. Yang tells us, Zhu Rong was from North Shurong. His family were hereditary ruling chiefs of the first rank and dukes of Bolingjun. He had over 8,000 tribesmen, several tens of thousands of horses, and wealth to match a heavenly treasury. This is a short paragraph, but clear enough to let his readers understand what kind of people they were. Shurong, Shoxian, Shanxi, a place on the north frontier, was in fact not the Erju place of origin, but a fief given to them as a reward when one of their ancestors made military contributions to Tuoba Gui, emperor of the Northern Wei Dynasty. Their earlier family place was in the area of Erju River, from where they received their surname. This also is evidence of non-Chinese customs in medieval Chinese society. The Erju were an ethnic group of Jie, a non-Chinese, non-Xianbei race from Central Asia. They were different from Han Chinese and Xianbei in their ethnic origin, their appearance, and in their behavior. Yang did not say directly that they were barbarians in this paragraph, but he implied it. He tells us that they originally came from Shurong in the north, and that their social status was that of hereditary chief, with their wealth counted by how many tribesmen and horses they controlled. In all these respects, they were unlike the Sinified Xianbei aristocrats. In other parts of his book, he referred to them by their non-Chinese names, which look barbarous when written in Chinese. He called their armies Hu cavalry, and he called them Hu barbarians. This word was used in a most derogatory way in the story of the Princess of Shouyang. The Princess of Shouyang, the elder sister of the Emperor Zhuang, was very beautiful. She was married to Xiaozong, Prince of Danyang, a refugee aristocrat from the south who had been given high positions in the northern Wei. When the capital fell, Xiaozong abandoned his province and fled north. Erju Shilong, who was dictator at the time, had the princess brought back to Luoyang. When he tried to force her, she reviled him with the words, "How dare you insult the daughter of a heavenly king, you barbarian dog? I would die by the sword rather than be sullied by a mutinous barbarian." In his fury, Erju Shilong strangled her. The princess called Erju a barbarian dog and called herself the daughter of the heavenly king, making a clear difference between herself and the Erju Jie people. Yang Xuanji directly insulted the Jie with such strong language because the Jie were a different people, not Xianbei, like Gao Huan and Yuan Tai. From the catastrophic damage which the Erju Jie did to Luoyang, it is clear that unlike the Xianbei, who lived in Luoyang and had adopted the culture of earlier Chinese dynasties, the Jie had no love of Chinese culture. Among the people of Luoyang, the Tuoba family of Xianbei had transformed their cultural identity to Han Chinese and lived a Han Chinese life in a Han Chinese city. They were completely different from people like the Erju Sogdians, whom they saw as barbarians in culture and in ethnicity. This shows that the white Jie Sogdians had continued their distinct identity even while being surrounded by Mongoloid groups who they didn't relate to. Gao Huan's rise. Following Erju Rong's assassination, Gao Huan, a prominent Xianbei military leader, emerged as a major power in the north. He strategically absorbed many of Erju Rong's former troops, including the Sogdian Jie warriors, into his own army, leveraging their combat prowess to consolidate his power. By incorporating the Jie warriors into his Xianbei army, Gao Huan significantly strengthened his military capabilities, which played a crucial role in his eventual establishment of the Northern Qi dynasty. According to the unearthed epitaph of Shi Chongui, the Shi clan of Shatuo origin that ruled the later Jin, 936 to 947, claimed that they were descendants of the Ji Emperor Shi Lei. The Shatuo were a mixed Turkic group with some partial Sogdian ancestry. The Tang dynasty rebel, An Lushan of Sogdian and Gokturk descent, was called a Jihu, Ji barbarian. Although he was not descended from the Ji, this shows the continued association between the Ji and Sogdians. The Jie people who stayed in China and Xianbei territories had eventually disappeared from mixing with these Mongoloid populations. But others eventually migrated to the north, where they mixed with white Scythian-descended groups instead. Batuo, the western founder of the Shaolin Temple. The Shaolin Temple was constructed on the north side of Shaoxi, the central peak of Mount Song, one of the 5 sacred mountains of China, by Emperor Xiaowen in honor of the Theravada missionary monk Batuo, Buddhabhadra. Batuo originally came from Central Asia. The dhyana master Buddhabhadra was the first abbot of the Shaolin monastery. His ancestral heritage was likely Sogdian descent via the Silk Road. In 464 CE, he was an early white Sogdian monk that traveled to China. Buddhabhadra means man with a conscience. In Bactria, he had begun to lose his religious faith after searching for spiritual enlightenment for many years. Some of his fellow monks advised him to become a wandering monk, which was not an uncommon practice at that time. After traveling to many countries, he ended up in China, where he gained the attention of Emperor Xiaowen, 467 to 499. During this period of time, all monks and teachers coming from the western regions were highly respected by the Xianbei rulers of the northern Wei Dynasty. Emperor Xiaowen himself warmly welcomed all Buddhist monks coming from the west, and he gave Batuo special status. According to the Dengfeng County recording, Batuo came to China in 464 and preached for 30 years Nikaya Buddhism that integrated with Taoist and local folk religions. 31 years later, in 495, the Shaolin Monastery was built by the order of Emperor Xiaowen of northern Wei for Batuo's preaching. In 494, Emperor Xiaowen moved the northern Wei capital from Pingcheng in modern Datong, Shanxi province, to Luoyang in Henan province, with Batuo traveling with him. The traditional story tells that during this time Batuo achieved spiritual enlightenment. It is also said Batuo liked to isolate himself in the woods surrounding Song Mountain, which was not far from the city of Luoyang. The emperor noticed his affinity for this area and decided that a temple should be built for him in this area. Construction began on the northern slope of Shaoxi Peak, and classical records state the Shaolin Temple officially opened on May 23, 495. Monk Buddhabhadra was officially installed as the first abbot. At this time, only a small, basic temple was built, lacking many of the other buildings and residences associated with later monasteries, and the temple did not have any lands associated with it to work or grow their own food. The state provided for the daily needs of the monks. At the Shaolin Temple, Batuo practiced Hinayana, Buddhism or Nikaya Buddhism, an early school of Buddhism, as opposed to the Chan school that Shaolin would later be famous for, that laid emphasis on freeing oneself spiritually from the inside out. Pilgrims from afar looking for Hinayana Buddhism ended up in the Shaolin Temple. Buddhabhadra translated many Buddhist texts and scriptures into Chinese, with the help of his disciples and the other monks of the monastery assisting him. This activity established Shaolin early on as an important translation center and pivotal to the early formation of Chinese Buddhist teachings and philosophy. Batuo was a master martial artist. His disciples Sengcho and Huiguang became well known for their martial staff skills through their time and studies with Batuo, to eventually be mentioned in the Chinese Buddhist canon. Martial arts were practiced in the temple at the time of Buddhabhadra. His primary Chinese disciples, Sengcho and Huiguang, became experts in martial arts during the time they began their religious and martial studies with him. Some literary works called Former Worthies Gather at the Mount Shuangfeng Stupa and Each Talks of the Dark Principle contain the following reference to him. Dhyana Master Buddha says, "The extreme principle is wordless. The sagely mind is unimpeded." The legend of Bodhidharma, blue-eyed founder of Zen and Kung Fu. Bodhidharma was a white Sogdian Buddhist monk who lived during the 5th or 6th century CE. He was the transmitter of Chan Buddhism to China and is regarded as its first patriarch. He was also the founder of Shaolin Kung Fu, as described in the Yijin Jing and the Taoist Association of Taoyin Gymnastics with Bodhidharma. According to the principal Chinese sources, Bodhidharma came from the western regions, which typically refers to Central Asia, particularly the Tarim Basin. The western regions was a historical name specified in the Chinese chronicles between the 3rd century BCE to the 8th century CE that referred to the regions west of Yumen Pass, most often Central Asia, or sometimes, more specifically, the easternmost portion of it, Altishar, or the Tarim Basin in southern Xinjiang. He was described in the earliest and more authentic accounts as a so-called Persian Central Asian and a blue-eyed barbarian, by which they meant a white Iranic-speaking Sogdian from the Tarim Basin, not an actual Persian from the Middle East, who didn't typically have blue eyes during this time period or practice Buddhism. Some legendary myths, created at a later date, had claimed that he was a South Indian, the third son of a great Indian king. But this latter description postdates the previous one and is not reliable or accurate. The South Indian legend had probably confused Bodhidharma with some other Buddhist monks like Lenamoti and Putiliuji, who actually were Indians. Throughout Buddhist art, Bodhidharma is depicted as an ill-tempered, large-nosed, profusely bearded, wide-eyed, non-Chinese person. The Japanese tradition generally regards Bodhidharma as a red-haired Persian, consistent with the earliest descriptions. This fresco from the Bezeklik cave, dated to the 9th or 10th century, can give us a good idea of what Bodhidharma may have looked like. It shows a white, blue-eyed Sogdian monk with reddish-brown hair teaching a mixed-race East Asian monk. Although Albert von Lecoq, 1913, assumed the reddish-haired monk was a Tocharian, modern scholarship has identified similar Europoid figures of the same cave temple, number 9, as ethnic Sogdians, an Eastern Iranic-speaking people who inhabited Turfan as an ethnic minority community during the phases of Tang Chinese 7th to 8th century and Uyghur rule 9th to 13th century. Bodhidharma was primarily active in the territory of the Northern Wei Dynasty. Modern scholarship dates him to about the early 5th century CE. Bodhidharma's teachings and practice center on meditation and the Lankattara Sutra. Bodhidharma means Dharma of awakening, Bodhi, in Sanskrit, and was often shortened to simply Dharma in Chinese. Daruma is the shortened form in Japanese, and from where the name of Daruma dolls derives, themselves modeled after the monk. Bodhidharma is his Dharma name. He was given this name by his teacher Prajnatara. His name prior to monkhood is said to have been Jayavarman or Bodhidana. Tibetan sources give his name as Bodhidharmotara or Dharmotara, that is, highest teaching Dharma of enlightenment. His traditional epithets in Chan texts include the founder, as the first teacher of Chan in China, golden rooster, bearded man, pierced-ear guest, wall-gazing Brahmin, and blue-eyed barbarian, a general term for white Europoid people from the western regions. The earliest text mentioning Bodhidharma is the record of the Buddhist monasteries of Luoyang, which was compiled in 547 by Yang Xuanji, a writer and translator of Mahayana sutras into Chinese. Yang gave the following account. At that time there was a monk of the western region named Bodhidharma, a Persian Central Asian. He traveled from the wild borderlands to China. Seeing the golden discs on the pole on top of Yongning Stupa reflecting in the sun, the rays of light illuminating the surface of the clouds, the jewel bells on the stupa blowing in the wind, the echoes reverberating beyond the heavens, he sang its praises. He exclaimed, "Truly this is the work of spirits." He said, "I am 150 years old, and I have passed through numerous countries. There is virtually no country I have not visited. Even the distant Buddha realms lack this." He chanted homage and placed his palms together in salutation for days on end. Obviously, the claim that he was 150 years old was a fictitious invention. The account of Bodhidharma in the Luoyang record depicts him as a miracle worker supposedly capable of mystical feats. He was associated with the martial arts and esoteric knowledge. A so-called Persian Central Asian from the western regions likely refers to Sogdians from the Tarim Basin, known to have practiced Buddhism and had blue eyes, not someone from the Iranian plateau. The second account was written by Tanlin, 506 to 574, which was the first text to claim that he was a South Indian. Likely due to confusing Bodhidharma with other Buddhist monks who actually did come from India. Tanlin's account was the first to mention that Bodhidharma attracted disciples, specifically mentioning Daoyu and Dazuhuike, the latter of whom would later figure very prominently in the Bodhidharma literature.
The mind, yet also the path to enlightenment.
The Anthology of the Patriarchal Hall says that in 527 Bodhidharma visited Emperor Wu of Liang, a fervent patron of Buddhism. How much karmic merit have I earned for ordaining Buddhist monks, building monasteries, having sutras copied, and commissioning Buddha images? None. Good deeds done with worldly intent bring good karma, but no merit. So what is the highest meaning of noble truth? There is no noble truth, there is only emptiness. Then, who is standing before me? I know not, your majesty. This encounter was included as the first koan of the Blue Cliff record. Bodhidharma is traditionally seen as introducing a Mahayana Buddhist practice of dhyana, meditation, in China. The Two Entrances and Four Practices is one of the most important works attributed to Bodhidharma. This is the main source for our knowledge of his teaching. According to this text, Bodhidharma taught two entrances to the Dharma. The first is a Subhadist teaching that directly apprehends the ultimate principle, that is, the true nature or Buddha nature. The second entrance deals with four practices. 1. Accepting all our sufferings as the fruit of past karma. 2. Accept our circumstances with equanimity. 3. To be without craving. And 4. To let go of wrong thoughts and practice the six perfections. Tanlin, in the preface to Two Entrances and Four Practices, and Daoshuan, in the further biographies of eminent monks, mentions a practice of Bodhidharma's termed wall-gazing. Both Tanlin and Daoshuan associate this wall-gazing with quieting the mind. In the Two Entrances and Four Practices, the term wall-gazing is given as follows. Those who turn from delusion back to reality, who meditate on walls, the absence of self and other, the oneness of mortal and sage, and who remain unmoved even by scriptures, are in complete and unspoken agreement with reason. Daoshuan states, the merits of Mahayana wall-gazing are the highest. Bodhidharma, painted by Miyamoto Musashi, swordsman, artist, and philosopher, who was close to Takuan Soho, a monk of the Rinzai sect who was linked to the samurai caste. There are early texts which explicitly associate Bodhidharma with the Lankavatara Sutra. Daoshuan, for example, in a late recension of his biography of Bodhidharma's successor Huike, has the sutra as a basic and important element of the teachings passed down by Bodhidharma. In the beginning, Dhyana Master Bodhidharma took the four-roll Lanka Sutra, handed it over to Huike, and said,
When I examine the land of China, it is clear that there is only this sutra. If you rely on it to practice, you will be able to cross over the world.
Another early text, the Record of the Masters and Disciples of the Lankavatara Sutra, of Jingjue, 683 to 750, also mentions Bodhidharma in relation to this text. Jingjue's account also makes explicit mention of sitting meditation, or Zuochan Zazen. For all those who sat in meditation, Master Bodhidharma also offered expositions of the main portions of the Lankavatara Sutra, which are collected in a volume of 12 or 13 pages, bearing the title of Teaching of Bodhidharma. In other early texts, the school that would later become known as Chan Buddhism is sometimes referred to as the Lankavatara school. The Lankavatara Sutra, one of the Mahayana Sutras, is a highly difficult and obscure text whose basic thrust is to emphasize the inner enlightenment that does away with all duality and is raised above all distinctions. It is among the first and most important texts for East Asian Yogacara. According to Suzuki, one of the recurrent emphases in the Lankavatara Sutra is a lack of reliance on words to effectively express reality. If, Mahamati, you say that because of the reality of words the objects are, this talk lacks in sense. Words are not known in all the Buddha lands. Words, Mahamati, are an artificial creation. In some Buddha lands, ideas are indicated by looking steadily, in others by gestures, in still others by a frown, by the movement of the eyes, by laughing, by yawning, or by the clearing of the throat, or by recollection, or by trembling. In contrast to the ineffectiveness of words, the sutra instead stresses the importance of the self-realization, that is, attained by noble wisdom, and, according to Suzuki, occurs when one has an insight into reality as it is. The truth is the state of self-realization and is beyond categories of discrimination. According to Suzuki, reflecting his own emphasis on Kensho, the sutra goes on to outline the ultimate effects of an experience of self-realization. The bodhisattva will become thoroughly conversant with the noble truth of self-realization, will become a perfect master of his own mind, will conduct himself without effort, will be like a gem reflecting a variety of colors, will be able to assume the body of transformation, will be able to enter into the subtle minds of all beings, and because of his firm belief in the truth of mind only, will, by gradually ascending the stages, become established in Buddhahood. Bodhidharma was disturbed by the poor physical shape of the Shaolin monks, and so he instructed them in techniques to maintain their physical condition as well as teaching meditation. He is said to have taught a series of external exercises called the 18 Arhat hands and an internal practice called the Sinew Metamorphosis Classic. In addition, after his departure from the temple, 2 manuscripts by Bodhidharma were said to have been discovered inside the temple, the Yijin Jing and the Shisui Jing. Copies and translations of the Yijin Jing survive to the modern day. The Shisui Jing has been lost. Buswell dates Bodhidharma's abode in China approximately at the early 5th century. Broughton dates Bodhidharma's presence in Luoyang to between 516 and 526, when the temple referred to, Yongning Temple, was at the height of its glory. Starting in 526, Yongning suffered damage from a series of events, ultimately leading to its destruction in 534. Over time, Bodhidharma had blended his Zen Buddhist teachings with local Taoist beliefs. A Qigong manual known as the Yijin Jing, Muscle Change Classic, Sinews Transformations Classic, says that Bodhidharma had founded the martial arts technique referred to as Kung Fu at the Shaolin Temple. The practice of Daoyin gymnastics was also started by Bodhidharma, and his Buddhist techniques had influenced Taoist meditation techniques. The preface of this work says that Bodhidharma left behind the Yijin Jing and further states that the monks obtained the fighting skills which made them gain some fame from this manual. The Yijin Jing is a manual of Daoyin exercises, a series of mental and bodily exercises to cultivate Jing, essence, and direct and refine Qi, the internal energy of the body according to traditional Chinese medicine. The Yijin Jing was left behind by Bodhidharma after his departure from the Shaolin monastery. It was discovered hidden in the walls of the temple years after he left. It was accompanied by another text, the Shisui Jing, which was passed to a student of Bodhidharma's, but has not survived to the present day. The monks of Shaolin practiced the exercises within the text, but lost the true purpose of the document. Lin Boyuan recounts that they selfishly coveted it, practicing the skills therein, falling into heterodox ways, and losing the correct purpose of cultivating the way. The Shaolin monks have made some fame for themselves through their fighting skill. This is all due to having obtained this manuscript. The Yijin Jing is a manual of Daoyin exercises, a series of cognitive body and mind unity exercises practiced as a form of Taoist Neigong, meditation and mindfulness to cultivate Jing, essence, and direct and refine Qi, the internal energy of the body according to traditional Chinese medicine. The practice of Daoyin was a precursor of Qigong and blended with the introduction of yoga into China with the spread of Buddhism, and was practiced in Chinese Taoist monasteries for health and spiritual cultivation. The Yijin Jing contains a relatively intense set of practices that aim to strengthen muscles and tendons, promote strength and flexibility, control and balance, increase speed and stamina, and improve balance and coordination and flexibility of the body and mind. Shaolin Kung Fu, also called Shaolin Wushu or Shaolin Quan, is the largest and most famous style of Kung Fu. It combines Mahayana Buddhist, Chan philosophy, and martial arts. It was developed by Bodhidharma, the blue-eyed barbarian from the western regions, in the Shaolin Temple in Henan, China. In Chinese folklore, there is a saying, Shaolin Kung Fu is the best under heaven, which indicates its superiority among martial arts, and all martial arts under heaven originated from Shaolin, which indicates its influence on other martial arts. The name Shaolin is also used as a brand for the external styles of Kung Fu. Many styles in southern and northern China use the name Shaolin. In the Zen koan tradition, Bodhidharma is mentioned as a significant figure. In Dogen's 13th century koan collection, the Shinji Shobogenzo, Bodhidharma is mentioned in 14 different koans. In the Gateless Gate by Wumen Huikai, A monk asked Zhao, "What is the meaning of the ancestral teachers, i.e. Bodhidharmas, coming from the west?" Zhao said, "The cypress tree in front of the hall." The Gateless Gate, case no. 37, in a short addendum from 1245 CE, the text refers to a motto attributed to Bodhidharma, "Bodhidharma coming from the west, unattached to any words, pointing directly to the mind of man, advocated seeing into one's nature and becoming Buddha." The legend of Dazu Huike and Bodhidharma is recounted in case number 41 of the Gateless Gate. Bodhidharma's image became the inspiration for Japanese Daruma dolls, which originated in Meiwa-era Meiwa Takasaki as good luck charms. A Daruma doll festival is held at the Shorinzan Daruma Temple in Takasaki every year, celebrating the city as the birthplace of the Daruma doll. Over 400,000 attendants come to purchase new dolls. A 1989 South Korean film, Why Has Bodhidharma Left for the East?, derives its title from a koan about Bodhidharma's legendary transmission of Chan Buddhism to China. The film screened at the 1989 Cannes Film Festival and was the first South Korean film to release theatrically in the United States. In 1994, the Hong Kong film Master of Zen, also known as Bodhidharma, adapted the legends of Bodhidharma's life into a martial arts drama film, partly inspired by the Masters' association with Shaolin Kung Fu. The 2 entrances and 4 practices, also known as Outline of Practice, is part of the larger Bodhidharma anthology that also includes teachings from some of Bodhidharma's students, such as Huike and Dharma Master Yuan. There also exists a Dunhuang manuscript titled Treatise of Dhyana Master Bodhidharma. Other works by Bodhidharma include Treatise on the Destruction of Characteristics, the Wake-Up Treatise or Treatise on Realizing the Nature, the Bloodstream Treatise, the Juegan Lun, the Genealogical Treatise, and the Verses on the Heart Sutra. Pointing directly to one's mind. One of the fundamental Chan texts attributed to Bodhidharma is a 4-line stanza whose first 2 verses echo the Lankavatara Sutra's disdain for words, and whose second 2 verses stress the importance of the insight into reality achieved through self-realization, a special transmission outside the scriptures, not founded upon words and letters. By pointing directly to one's mind, it lets one see into one's own true nature and thus attain Buddhahood. This stanza, originally Bodhidharma's, was retold in later periods. Bodhidharma died at the banks of the Luo River, where he was interred by his disciple Dazu Wiki, possibly in a cave. According to Daoshuan's chronology, Bodhidharma's death must have occurred prior to 534, the date of the Northern Wei's fall, because Dazu Wiki subsequently leaves Luoyang for Ye. Furthermore, citing the shore of the Luo River as the place of death might possibly suggest that Bodhidharma died in the mass executions at Heian in 528. Supporting this possibility is a report in the Chinese Buddhist canon stating that a Buddhist monk was among the victims at Heian. This Japanese scroll calligraphy of Bodhidharma reads, "Zen points directly to the human heart, see into your nature, and become Buddha." It was created by Hakuin Akaku, 1686 to 1769. Legends about Bodhidharma. Several stories about Bodhidharma have become popular legends, which are still being used in the Chan, Seon, and Zen tradition. 9 years of wall gazing. According to one story, Bodhidharma failed to make a favorable impression in South China, and so he was said to have traveled to the Shaolin Monastery. After either being refused entry or being ejected after a short time, he lived in a nearby cave where he faced a wall for 9 years, not speaking for the entire time. The biographical tradition is littered with apocryphal tales about Bodhidharma's life and circumstances. In one version of the story, he is said to have fallen asleep 7 years into his 9 years of wall gazing. Becoming angry with himself, he cut off his eyelids to prevent it from happening again. According to the legend, as his eyelids hit the floor, the first tea plants sprang up, and thereafter, tea would provide a stimulant to help keep students of Chan awake during Zuochen Zazen. Appearance after his death. 3 years after Bodhidharma's death, Ambassador Song Yun of Northern Wei is said to have seen him walking while holding a shoe at the Pamir Mountains. Song asked Bodhidharma where he was going, to which Bodhidharma replied, "I am going home." When asked why he was holding his shoe, Bodhidharma answered, "You will know when you reach Shaolin Monastery. Don't mention that you saw me, or you will meet with disaster." After arriving at the palace, Song told the emperor that he met Bodhidharma on the way. The emperor said Bodhidharma was already dead and buried, and had Song arrested for lying. At Shaolin Monastery, the monks informed them that Bodhidharma was dead and had been buried in a hill behind the temple. The grave was exhumed and was found to contain a single shoe. The monks then said, "Master has gone back home," and prostrated 3 times. For 9 years he had remained, and nobody knew him. Carrying a shoe in hand, he went home quietly without ceremony. Communist persecution of the Shaolin Temple. The Shaolin Temple, born from Batuo's vision and elevated by Bodhidharma's unyielding gaze, became a symbol of resilience. Bodhidharma's wall-gazing and martial disciplines evolved into Chan, Zen, Buddhism, and Shaolin Kung Fu, disciplines that spread globally, carrying the essence of those ancient wanderers. Even as dynasties rose and fell, these practices endured, adapting through Mongol invasions, Ming reforms, and Qing suppressions. During the Cultural Revolution, the monks of Shaolin Temple were forced to return to secular life, Buddha statues were destroyed, and temple properties were invaded. The Communist Revolution had sought to eradicate such feudal superstitions. After this period ended, the Shaolin Temple was repaired and rebuilt. The buildings and other material heritage that were destroyed, including the Daxiangbao Hall and the stone portraying Bodhidharma facing the wall, were reconstructed according to their originals. Others, such as the ancient martial arts training ground, the pagoda forest, and some stone carvings that survived, remain in their original state. Today, amid China's modern skyline, the legacy of these blue-eyed barbarians persists. Bodhidharma's stern statue gazes out from Shaolin's grounds, his wide eyes a reminder of the Western region's gift. Monks in saffron robes parade with swastika displays invoking ancient Aryan symbols of enlightenment. Millions practice Qigong and Kung Fu, unaware that their movements trace back to a Sogdian monk's sinew-strengthening classics. The epic history of these white founders, from the Kushan Empire's golden age to the dissemination of Zen Buddhism and the establishment of the Shaolin Temple, their odyssey underscores Buddhism's Aryan path of awakening. In the words of Bodhidharma himself,
Pointing directly to the mind, see your own nature and become Buddha.
Through their tireless efforts, the light of the Dharma illuminated China and the world forever.